Nobody asked me to talk about Hideo Kojima partnering with Sony, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Welcome everybody to yet another episode of Nobody Asked Colin. This is the show where I just get a few things off my mind, and on today's show I want to talk about some recent news. Well, last night was kind of a big deal for Hideo Kojima and Sony Computer Entertainment as Andrew House announced a partnership between Kojima Productions and Sony to create an exclusive for the PlayStation 4. Oh, and before we get too far, this also means that Kojima has really, truly, officially left Konami. Hooray! Now, I've already seen some news articles not quite get this right, so allow me to explain what just happened. Number one, Kojima has started a brand new production company called Kojima Productions. Creative name, man. Number two, they will be functioning as a second-party software developer for this new game. In other words, you know Bloodborne from Software? From Software? Anyway, you know how From Software made Bloodborne for the PlayStation 4 and that's an exclusive and it's not going to go anywhere? But they also make Dark Souls and that's everywhere? That's basically what they're going to be doing. Yes, it's a timed exclusive and it will come to PC eventually, but this is still a pretty big partnership. So to reiterate, no, Sony does not own Kojima Productions. Can't imagine why he would want to remain independent. This is great news for everybody except for Konami, but who cares? They're dead to me. First, I want to talk about why this is great news for Sony. Look, I love the PlayStation 4. I love its controllers. I love its user interface. The only problem is, well, it doesn't really have many good exclusives. Look guys, I really like The Order 1886, but you're not going to convince many people that's a good game. The PlayStation 4 has a major exclusive drought. It looks like 2016 is going to shake that up a bit because they do have Uncharted 4 and they do have Horizon Zero Dawn. Not to mention all the first-party studios they own that haven't really announced what they're doing yet. I mean, yeah, they're completely dominating the console wars, but there's something to be said about keeping your audience happy. Besides that, any game from Kojima Productions is going to have a wider appeal. You gotta consider that Metal Gear Solid: The Phantom Pain was on a multitude of platforms, selling over 750,000 copies on Steam alone. So when we finally see that very first trailer at some sort of E3 or PlayStation event and it says, "From the creator of Metal Gear Solid," it's gonna turn heads. But why exactly did Kojima go with Sony? Well, I have a few ideas. Nothing cemented, but here's a few guesses. Right off the bat, I'd have to guess it's because they're Sony, and Kojima and Sony have had a long partnership dating back all the way to the very first Metal Gear game way back on the PlayStation 1. Secondly, I think it's because the PlayStation 4 is the most powerful console currently available. If you look back at Mr. Kojima's history, he has a tendency to create some rather hardware-intensive titles. It's the reason he re-released Snatcher on the Sega CD, Police Knots on the PlayStation, the very first Metal Gear Solid on the PlayStation 1, Metal Gear Solid 2 on the PlayStation 2, and the original Xbox, and then there was that Twin Snakes thing on the GameCube, but that's entirely different. It's why he went to the PlayStation 3 with its Blu-ray capability, and why he's been leaning heavily into the PC market in recent years. Thirdly, it's because exclusivity creates focus. Rather than trying to spread out your designs across multiple different hardware SKUs, you just have a single console to focus on, and that can be really good for a startup company. Not to mention, this essentially means that Sony is going to be taking care of all the marketing, which is also good. And lastly, I think it has a lot to do with creative freedom. Sony has a reputation for allowing some rather unusual titles, like Until Dawn or Unfinished Swan, plethora of other titles that might not fit into an exact mold, but yet Sony encourages and funds these projects, which I'm sure is totally different from the way that Konami functions. Kojima has announced for years his intentions not to make any more Metal Gear Solid games, but then he would always come back. Can only imagine his pitch meetings at Konami. Yeah, so I'm thinking about making this game. It's like in the 60s and it's all about like the way that war was back then. Oh yeah. So this is like the next Metal Gear, right? This is the next Metal Gear Solid? No, I was thinking more like, you know, it's like something maybe a little bit, you know, different from that, like not like, you know. That's great. Metal Gear Solid 3. Can't wait. Oh yeah, cool. All right. Thank you. Metal Gear Solid 3, I guess. And even if you're a Metal Gear Solid fan like myself, this is amazing news because Kojima's other games are equally interesting. I didn't say equally good, I said interesting. He's done some pretty far out there experiments in the past, including Boktai, a title where you had to play outside because the cartridge could absorb solar rays and weaken the enemy vampires inside the game. Then you've got Zone of the Enders, which is like this weird mech suit Gundam wannabe where kids are inside robot battles. I don't know. It was a really good series, especially part 2. And then there's the often ignored adventure games such as Snatcher and Police Knots. These are revered titles, and maybe it's something that Kojima would like to explore further. But I'm willing to bet whatever it is, it's not going to be like Metal Gear. Which if you're a Kojima fan, is amazing news. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Nobody Asked Colin. Please let me know what you want to see from Kojima and Sony in the comments below. What you thought about this episode. And I don't know, what'd you eat today? I'm curious. Well, thank you all for watching. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go nurse my crippling pachinko addiction. Woohoo! Metal balls!